Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by NextGen Purpose. EI serves up thoughtful conversations with industry leaders and pioneers who support a regenerative future for our food system. The stories shared by our guests are meant to spark curiosity and inspire informed global change. Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. Today with me, I'm so pleased to have Kishan Vasani, who is the CEO and co-founder of Spoonshot. Welcome, Kishan.
Thank you, Justine. Great to be here.
Wonderful to have you. I believe you're traveling right now. Is that correct?
Constantly traveling at the moment. It's event season, and we kind of have operations and things in different countries. So we're just kind of non-stop at the moment. Might as well enjoying the traveling after 2 years of being at home.
Okay, so I do understand that the time zone for us was a little tricky, and I appreciate you doing this. It's quite early where you are, right?
Yes, I'm here in India today, and it's 8 a.m., but all good.
Okay, well, thanks so much for accommodating us. So for those that are not familiar or do not know you, Kishan, can you tell us a little bit about you? Let's start with that.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm about 15, 17 years into my career. I'm a marketer by profession. I guess you'd call me a serial entrepreneur. And I've worked in food tech for the last 10 years. So I used to have a marketing agency. That was kind of my first big venture. And that was kind of a digital marketing business, this was in the early days of digital marketing before everybody really knew what Google Ads was and all these kind of things. So lots of different marketing things online, like email and affiliate and ads and SEO and things like that. And then moved into tech and food tech specifically. I was at Just Eat, which is it's like Grubhub, similar to in the US, and was there for 3.5 years, 2 leadership roles between Series B and post IPO. And it was that experience at Just Eat that kind of opened my eyes to the world of digital and food and combining these worlds and the opportunities that were sort of emerging, which led to what is now my current venture, Spoonshot, which is now I'm into, I guess, the entrepreneurial journey for this particular round is in year 7. So it's been quite some time.
Wonderful. So, and for those that are listening and watching that are not familiar with Spoonshot, what is Spoonshot?
So Spoonshot is a food and beverage intelligence technology and platform where essentially we help the industry, farm to fork, I guess, with understanding the future of foods, helping sort of predict consumer needs, trends, opportunities, and we leverage 2 big and important things. One, on one hand, we are an AI first company, so we're using big data sets in the public domain to sort of analyze them and understand what's really going on. And then on the other side, we apply food science knowledge to actually connect all of that big data and find those opportunities and trends as well. So yeah, we're a research company, I guess. We're a modern research company.
Wow. So what inspired this? I know that you have a lot of experience in food and marketing, but why this niche?
Yeah, I'd love to say it was a deliberate thing that happened. And I woke up one morning and I was like, oh, let's do, food market research and bring it to the 21st century. I wish it was like that, but it wasn't. It was more of an evolution. And that's kind of why, this is year 7 of this particular entrepreneurial journey, because as a first-time tech founder, while I had a digital marketing business, that's a very different space. Obviously, it's service-oriented and this is technology. And sort of the passion that drove me to start this particular tech journey or food tech journey was because of that time at Just Eat. Having seen lots of different opportunities, I felt like the thing that I was most passionate about was personalization of food. I'm an avid foodie. I always want my meals to be enjoyable. Nobody wants a bad meal. Even if you're not a foodie, nobody wants a bad meal or bad experience. And I found it fascinating that, across the world of tech in different niches, different verticals, there was a recognized leader in personalization. So in e-commerce, it's Amazon. In music, it's Spotify, videos, YouTube. Almost every sector has a personalization leader, Netflix. And yet food is perhaps the most personal decision that everyone in the world makes 3 or 4 times a day. And nobody really, you couldn't really point to a single company and say, oh, they know what they're doing in terms of they are the guys for food personalization. They know what everybody likes to eat and when. And so for me, that was kind of the opening premise to the idea, and saying that could we build a platform? Could I build a platform that fundamentally predicted an individual's taste preferences at any point in time and make the perfect recommendation to them when they use that technology? Or so we actually started as a consumer facing mobile app. That was the beginning of our journey. We were called DishQ back then. This was in early 2016, and me and my co-founder spent a couple of years actually trying to build an app that still leveraged big data and food science, those two pillars that I talked about earlier, leveraging that to predict individual taste preferences. So imagine, Justine, you open up the app and it literally makes a set of 10 dish recommendations to you based upon understanding your preferences, the time of day, all these other different things. And actually it was doing pretty well, but it was still small. And, ultimately we decided that wasn't the right place for us to go for a couple of different reasons. One, scaling consumer apps is very costly, it requires a lot of funding. The second thing is it felt more and more like, for it to be a complete experience, we would have to connect the user to a delivery platform to go and get the food. And then we felt like we're just becoming another delivery company, which me and my co-founder did not want to do, having both come from that universe. Ultimately, long story short, we pivoted away from that. And, instead of now predicting individual preferences, Spoonshot is actually about predicting sort of preferences at scale, if you will. So it's kind of an evolution of the idea of food personalization.
And it's so unique and different. I mean, that doesn't exist really.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of people when I was doing the research for the food personalization piece, a lot of people had tried this. There was a large graveyard of apps that had been and done that. And some of them have had some medium success. Some had been acquired, but no one had really nailed it. And it's because, it's complex, right? It's food. It's a tangible thing. Software can only go so far, right? You have to still connect someone to a real world experience of eating the food. And the other thing is markets are so different. If you're trying, it's not like you can build TikTok around it and it's the same user experience globally. You have to have a nuanced, localized experience related to what's going on in each country's food market. So there are some big challenges around it. And also I felt that, it was probably more of a vitamin, if I take that analogy, than a painkiller solution. I think, I think it's more of a feature to somebody's app than it is an app on its own. So if like Uber Eats wanted to build that in, then or DoorDash or whoever, that would make probably more sense for their business. And in fact, the bit I didn't say was that we did a mini pivot before we kind of moved to Spoonshot, and the mini pivot was taking our app and actually turning it into a B2B technology, and we were selling our food recommendation engine to other delivery platforms. So we actually had a few customers.
Wow.
But ultimately scaling an API, which was the method of selling the solution, we felt was a bit painful, bit more of a vitamin than a painkiller. We just didn't think that was the opportunity that was going to, ultimately help us realize our ambition of building a sort of a game-changing piece of software. So that's kind of, but it was a fascinating journey just to see, I remember going into a lot of Starbucks sort of every week and asking people to test the app and, ask them to think, what do they think of the predictions? And that was a lot of fun, like just, that consumer research and seeing how well we were able to predict individual preferences. But
Kishan, a question for you is, what role did culture play in this? Because I would imagine that if you roll it out in London and you roll it out in the US and you roll it out in Milwaukee, or, first, if you think macro and you think, from continent to continent, and then you think within state to state, country to country, state to state, it's going to change.
Absolutely.
Right?
Trends are local, tastes are personal. Like that's the basic premise of our idea. And we had to factor in all sorts of things like time of day for meals would change country to country. So for example, in the UK, tea time in the UK is a sort of an early dinner. In India, for example, dinner isn't usually till normally like earliest is 7, but more like 8 and 9 o'clock, right? Just understanding meal occasions, understanding things like the spice preferences of different markets as well. Again, take India versus the US, obviously big differences in terms of general preference. So you have to really understand a local view on food. You have to have that food nuance. And that's why it was important for us to really immerse ourselves in each market. And we even have, even today, even at Spoonshot, when we're launching data for a new market, we cover 3 markets today. We actually have a very strong and robust localization process, which allows us to fundamentally understand all the food nuances around culture in a market. And we also work, every time we launch a new market, we work with a sort of an innovation and food expert in that market who can help us sort of bring it to life. So that's, trends have to be understood locally, and they manifest very differently, trends in different markets, given a particular region and certain cultural and social preferences.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, when you travel around the world, when you work in different places, when you visit them for work, you start to see the ways that people experience food in different ways, do business over different meals, how they incorporate it into their life, and how it can be very different. And food is at the core of all of it. And so understanding culture within food, I think, is integral. And so when you're doing this, to me, this seems really relevant.
Absolutely. I remember even like when I was at Just Eat, I was in a role, head of international marketing, which means I was traveling around. Just Eat was present in 12 countries at the time, and I was traveling around 8 of them, a lot of them in Europe. And it was fascinating to me, even myself as a European or from the UK, like how different food culture is, even around like a lunchtime in European markets. So in the UK, it's really normal to sit at your desk, have a sandwich, just get on with your work or whatever. And then you go to Denmark, for example, and it's like you get up, you sit together either as a team or a company, and you have lunch together, and it's a very important part of the social day. And even those kind of little nuances around occasions and the togetherness factor. And of course, we know that the Nordic societies are much more sort of about the society and the group and the community compared to more individualistic ones. But just those things were fascinating to me in terms of when we were trying to build these apps and understand local preferences, really had to think about all of these nuances.
Yeah, when we lived in Mexico City for 2 years, and during this time on Fridays, people would go out for like a larger lunch with work, with their friends, with their colleagues, and lunch would often be at 2:30, and you wouldn't plan for anything else afterwards because you'd be there through dinner. You'd be there 5 through 6. You would just be there. And so and then there was like Sunday where you'd come and you'd invite people at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock for an afternoon barbecue, but they could be there till 11. So it's these kinds of things. And I often have conversations, and we live in California now and originally I'm from the East Coast, and I have a conversation with my partner, and he's always like, you like to sit there and eat all day long for these events. So I'm like, it's not about the eating always. It's about it's about, just spending time over food together and not rushing through everything. And
the Sunday brunch.
That's together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah, I mean, we see Sunday brunches in other parts of the world as being important. A Sunday roast in the UK, for example, another important meal time. So yeah, I've really enjoyed immersing myself in these different elements to kind of understand how that plays out particularly in the case of where we are today as a company in terms of trends and opportunities. I think fascinating, because we're seeing a lot of trends emerging around the occasion. I think the occasion is becoming, whether it's the meal occasion, the festive occasion, the seasonal occasion, more and more innovation is happening around occasions.
Yeah, I agree. When I lived in London, we used to go on Friday nights to a pub, and or to somebody's house. They'd invite everybody over to have food, and I really enjoyed that. On Sunday night we'd have our curry, and wherever it is that you live, there's all these different kinds of occasions, like you're saying. And I think that culturally, they're all a little bit different, but the idea that threads us all together is the same. It's the family, the friends, the idea that you're spending time together, and the food is just bringing us all together. So that being said, I know that you were at Future Food Tech. And, I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience there and what you guys talked about.
Absolutely. So, we've been a partner with Future Food Tech series actually for a long time now. And this year in particular, we're their intelligence partner. And what that means is we're kind of coming into every one of their events. So there's 3 major events, of which the most recent one was New York Alt Proteins. And we're really around each event, we're launching a piece of thought leadership associated to the kind of themes of the event. So last year, alt proteins, when we were there, we actually did an overall sort of alt proteins state of the landscape booklet, if you will, or data catalog. This year, we decided to dive into a specific space. In this case, it was the future of and the urgency around plant-based, the need for plant-based seafood and fish alternatives, like that being driven largely by the fact that fish is extremely popular as regular fish and seafood is extremely popular, but of course ocean populations are dwindling and overfishing is happening, and that love for fish and seafood is driving actually the urgency for plant-based seafood. And yes, there's definitely some companies that have been out there in these last few years, and it's definitely a space that's increasing in attention, but it needs far more attention versus its perhaps cousin in terms of the plant-based meat alternatives, and whether it's the Impossibles or the Beyonds. It needs far more attention. So we did a presentation and an insights on that. And in fact, if any of your readers want to, or followers on the podcast want to get into that, then they can go to spoonshot.com/white papers, and it will be there as well, so they can download that for free. So yeah, that was one element of it, and we found that the audience was really receptive to that and really agreed with the importance in this space. And another element of our sort of venture there was actually to really understand what else is going on in the space. And I think one of the interesting things that we're seeing at alt proteins as a whole in the community is perhaps there's a lot of sort of insiders just telling each other things that we already know. And this, I mean, it's the preaching to the choir, essentially, I think, on some level. And I think we need to, as an industry, get out there more to sort of bring in a wider audience. I mean, everyone who's in the space, of course, wants to make their brand, a winner. And I think one of the downsides of this is the fact that because there are so many technologies and sort of approaches to sort of alt proteins and the different subvariants, everyone's vying for mindshare in a fairly small audience still, even though it's growing, of course, still a small audience versus the mainstream, and trying to convince them about their technology, their methodology, their claims, their approach to solving this problem. And I think what we're seeing in the data is mass consumer confusion, right, around on-pack labels and what am I eating? Is it fake meat? Is it something that was made in a lab? It will, and not to mention all the regulatory headaches that are coming in, and the sort of legacy industries trying to protect themselves through government lobbying and all this kind of stuff. So I think.
Well, I also think, just to add to your point, people now more than ever are actually starting to ask questions. Before, they're like, oh, it's plant-based, and that's a positive thing because people didn't want to eat the fish or this or that. And they were grasping for an alternative. But now, because we're getting more information, more options, people are they want more information. They want more transparency. They want to know. And when we got original options, there were more fillers, more oils, more things that maybe weren't as good for us but we didn't know that then. And now people are a bit more educated, have more information.
Yes, they have more information, but that's a double-edged sword as well, right? Because we live in the information age, and more often than not, we're all feeling whatever it is, whatever choice we're making. Go to a supermarket is just can be overwhelming experience. Grocery stores, totally. It's you don't know where to look.
Enough information also. They run with a little piece of it. So, my goal with this platform is to give people like yourself the chance to amplify their message, because I'm not the expert. But the goal is that get a little bit here and there. So I didn't mean to jet in there, but I really think it's an important conversation to have, because there's some information. And I think the point that I was trying to make and just connect with you on was the importance of transparency that's going on now. Yeah,
transparency is a big one, especially on a lot of these claims and sort of on-pack labels that you see, which frankly, historically have had some questionable and tenuous links, right? And I mean, there's also the flip side of this, which is that, we've seen data that suggests that consumers are not even reading much. I mean, I think we live in a society that doesn't read. I mean, we've all dismissed every single message that comes on our apps and notifications on our phones without really paying any attention to them. But that's just generally the way the world is right now. So getting that messaging absolutely tight and right is absolutely key, and then being able to be authentic about this as well. That's authenticity is definitely the need of the hour across the board in this space. But I think the industry as a whole, the alt proteins industry, needs to do a better job of coming together and really saying, look, us with this infighting might be too strong a word, but this kind of like competing messaging is not helping anyone. We can, all the ships can rise with that tide rising. So we need to like make sure that we're encouraging things for the tide to rise so that all ships rise as well, right? So in a sense, agreeing common terminologies around this space so that consumers really clearly have at least a close to a singular message coming through in the marketing comms and the positioning, so that then it's a question of the things that matter to consumers, which is about the taste, right? Ultimately, if you're going to win over the mainstream Joes and Janes of the world, then you have to, they honestly will not care about the plant-based element of this, or the sustainability element, or the climate-based element of whatever these things are. They will care that it tastes great, and that's what's ultimately going to win them over, and taste and price probably will be the two determining factors. And the other stuff is sort of, if anything, just an icing on the cake for the mainstream audience.
Yes, I would agree. So, this was a great partnership that you have going on with Future Food Tech, that we have going on with Future Food Tech, because it allows us to continue to amplify what they're doing to help promote, their past and their future conversations. And so, I'm curious, what was your greatest takeaway from Future Food Tech when you were there at the last conference?
That's a great question. I think for us, we're seeing a lot of interesting things happening in sort of the potato space, actually, and you'd be surprised to say that. And we obviously all use the potato in everyone's familiar with it, everyone uses it and consumes it all the time in various forms, but there is an increasing amount of interest in the other ways that you can use potatoes to solve all sorts of sustainability problems. And I think that was one of the sort of, I guess it wasn't perhaps the biggest thing that we saw coming out of the conference, but it was perhaps the newest and interesting thing. And then when we went to another conference called, or trade show, the IFT First in Chicago a few weeks ago, that was perhaps even more amplified at that event. So there are a lot of interesting things happening in this space right now, which are exciting for the industry.
And, with Future Food Tech London coming up, do you guys have another partnership coming up, and what will your role be if you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited about Future Food Tech London. And the thing that we were just discussing actually about how we're going to present there and what topics. And actually, we're going to do something a little bit different this time, and perhaps slightly riskier, which is to actually do a new trend discovery live on stage. So we're going to literally leverage the power of our platform, our research platform, literally just fire it up on the screen, and we're gonna poll the audience on the day, sort of the attendees, from a set of topics and what they would like us to dive into, and then we'll take the one that wins the poll and just go deep and do live trend discovery and pull out real-time insights and see what happens. And yeah, it's going to be fun.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Kishan, thank you so much for joining us today on Essential Ingredients. It was great to meet you. It was great to learn about Spoonshot. I look forward to meeting you at Future Food Tech. And if our guests wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way to learn more about Spoonshot?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Justine. It's been great having a conversation with you. Obviously, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. And also in terms of Spoonshot, go to our website, spoonshot.com. We have a free version of our platform, so you can get all sorts of free research and insights if you go to spoonshot.com/start.
Wonderful. Thanks again. I want to thank our guests for tuning in today, and don't forget to check out our show notes. And for additional information on Future Food Tech, we will have more information on how to sign up for the event that's coming up, and any additional information that you may be interested in finding out.
To learn more about these episodes and access show notes, go to nextgenpurpose.com and choose podcast. If you like this episode, head to Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform to subscribe and leave us a review. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel to subscribe to our EI videocast and give this episode a like while you're there. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Next Gen Purpose, and connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Justine_Reichman. Thanks for joining us.